given all the permissions.
Recording. At any point, Rich, if something, if something stops, anything like that, it'll all get edited anyway.
Okay.
If there's any taken out.
And if you can not mute yourself, that's really useful, because no matter what's going on in your background, I can just leave it. So that's good. I'll do the intro. I've got my 3 quick fire questions. It's basically what's the big thing that you'd like to solve with the industry, I suppose. Then it's where's your passion for this come from, and then what would you like people that have no idea, and I suppose in this case no idea means people not in the UK, to better know about the UK industry. So just to get us going, I'll do 3 quick fire questions, and then Sean has some more contextual things, if that's okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right, I'll do a clap. I'm told it's useful, but I looked at the features. It's not that useful, but anyway. The current state of the UK CP/EP industry. We're here with Richard Aitch. We're going to be looking at licensing. We're going to be looking at the current regime in the UK, the context, and everything to do with CP in this country. I'm here with Sean West, and together we're going to explore this topic. Richard, it's a great pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Pelham. Good afternoon, Sean. Yes, very well, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, lovely to hear you here. I know you're very prolific. You're a published author and a great friend of the industry. So let's start with 3 quick fire questions. What do you think is sort of wrong with the current landscape? What problem do you think needs to be solved?
That question I could answer. How long have you got, really, basically, is the answer to that one. I could waffle on and bore you to tears for eternity. The industry as a whole, I think, in order to look at the future, you need to look at the past, specifically in the last 3 decades. And that is really where close protection interest and involvement for me actually begun. So when we look back into the early 90s, I attended 2 commercial CP courses. And don't forget, this is an unregulated industry at the time. And the courses were, one of them was held in a garage in the bottom of a garden. The other one was more properly designed within a purpose location. So it had a house to conduct residential security. There was an element of vehicles, counter surveillance, and a whole host of subject matter, the delivery of which wasn't actually that bad, considering the period of the industry in itself. I conducted those with a view to leaving the forces that I was presently employed in, and having conducted those 2 courses, I then fired off my CV to all and sundry companies in the naivety that it was at the time. I soon realised that obviously you're in a catch-22 situation. You need experience, and the companies out there at the time, close protection wasn't really a huge industry sector. It was very niche, boutique style, and very specific according to clients. I mean, when a comparison to today's environment, the industry is a behemoth now. It's huge on a global scale, and it was very niche in those days, and experience was really the catch-22. So that's the reason why I transferred within the forces to gain that course, training, and the experience to then, with a view to leave. So that started in 1996 for me, the training and first deployment in close protection. When I then left the forces some 6 years later, you're coming into an industry where I was absolutely shocked at the standards on display. Standards in terms of training, standards in operationally. And although I had gone into a permanent role, I was surrounded by people with a similar background. So for the majority of which, those people that didn't have our background, you could easily tell the difference in standards on the ground and the way they spoke about CP in general. So when you actually consider where the industry is going and where it has been, and the implementation of the SIA imposing their standards for the UK, you have to accept the fact that in answering the question, is the industry in a better place now than what it was pre-SIA? The answer has to be yes, it is. And the answer is yes, because the two remits of the SIA, one was to remove the criminality of the industry, and the second was to raise standards. Now, argumentatively, the second aspect of what they've done, to my mind, they just haven't done whatsoever. It's lip service, token gesture, and the bottom line with the standards out there is very watered down. And here we are talking about the level of the industry right now. But one has to bottom line accept that the industry is actually off to a better start point now than what it was 3 decades ago. It's in a much better place, but comparatively speaking, it's a much larger industry as well. So in terms of answering your question, I mean, the industry is annoying to me. It actually gets me frustrated because there are various excuses now concerning the level of training. There's a certain level of acceptance that this is our lot in life. We have to deal with it and get on with it. Stop the negativity. Stop whinging about the training. Stop whinging about the standards out there. And yet, if we don't whinge, nothing will happen. Now, before the advent of Facebook and the increase in social media, the actual presence of the internet has benefited both training and operational views of the industry as a whole. There are positives and a huge number of negatives to it, and generally there are forums that were created that would the thrust of which was actually a good idea. It was a basis to discuss aspects of the industry where people could come together and know more about the industry, to learn from each other. And yet there was a section of that industry, of the forums, where there'd be arguments involved, and there'd be parts of the forums where there'd be boxing elements of it for people to go and argue. And it was the part of the industry really that you have to stand back and say, what is going wrong with this? Why are people arguing? Why is there a general attitude of this? And the thing is, one has to now revert back to the SIA, because what they've imposed to the industry is an open door policy to all and sundry. Anyone can enter the industry. You don't, regardless of background. You don't need any previous experience, previous training to actually enter the security industry as a start point. There's no minimum age. There's no minimum medical. I mean, I don't wish to bore you too much, but I can run through a list of aspects that are detriment to affecting close protection operational performance. So we have the 4 main subjects. We have poor components of a CP training candidate, poor components of a CP training course, poor components of a CP training provider, poor components of a CP service provider. And then on top of all of that, you have the imposition of poor standards by government organisations and authorities, the SIA, for example. And then on top of that, another layer, the CP operations are detrimentally affected by the laws. So in terms of, for example, when you do a comparison between a commercial CP operation and that within a government nature, a government CP operation have got the full powers of the law on their side. So when, for example, they're doing a move with a principal when they're going to a location, they can control other traffic flow. They can close roads. They can go whatever speed they like. When they get to the venue, they can have cordons. They can control unknowns. They can control crowds and so on. They can have a sterile environment from A to B and throughout the move from A to B. So in terms of where we are with the industry, yes, we're in a better place, but is it actually fit for purpose? And the answer is no, it's not. And it's not fit for purpose because anyone can enter the industry, the training is poor, and there's no oversight. And so the end user, any client, if they could have a serious reason for their buying of the service, the selling of the service is done by the full scope of business aspects and everything detriment because of a business. Again, if we were to make a comparison between the commercial sector and the government sector, the commercial sector is detrimentally influenced by everything associated with business. So when someone says, what is the business of close protection to a company owner? Well, first and foremost, at the top of his list is to make a profit. And there are detrimental aspects of profit making within a CP operation. But the reasons for that CP operation, for that principle, may be exactly the same for that private sector as it is in the government sector. They may have some specific targeted threat, and yet within a private sector, it's detrimentally affected because the way a company sells its services, the way it provides its services, and a knock-on effect for everything. So when you actually look at the business as a whole, the company is affected possibly by the fact that it's incorporated by someone who may not even have any knowledge or training experience within the service they're delivering. The management may not have any experience or knowledge. The people they put on the ground are recipients of very poor training. And so the end user, after you've actually gone through all of this entire process, the end user receives a very watered down service in terms of operational effectiveness. Mm-hmm. The actual underlying fact or the underlying point with the whole of this topic and the reason why we are where we are is, to my mind, solely based on the very fact of the lack of any incidents that could be directly attributed to the poor function of a CPO on the ground. Now, what I mean by that is, when you think about the many CPO operations out there in the private sector, how many times do you see videos or hear of something going terribly wrong where the principal has been injured or killed as a result of the poor effectiveness on the ground by the security providing? And because of the lack of occurrences, nothing can be attributed to actually spike an inference that actually, yes, the training is that poor, that's why that's happened, and that's why that principal has been injured or killed. And because close protection in the private sector, for the majority of reasons, is conducted because of a life smoother. It's provided because of a what if, in case of, as opposed to, I have a specific threat, I'm coming to London, I need security without a doubt. It's a can of worms question that you've asked, Pelham, and there are so many affecting factors, so many influences that affect the end result for any client. It's a whole host of manifestations that have been imposed by the SIA. As I say, I mean, I could talk for ages about it, but I mean, I'm chopping from one end to another. I'm missing a whole load out. There's a whole load of text that I could waffle on about forevermore. But the thing, I mean, close protection, as in for many of us, is a passion of mine, and it has been for decades. And it's just so sad to see that we have a government regulator who falls to the bottom line in a minimalistic approach. But the thing is, in their defense, in the SIA's defense, it's not really their fault, because when one looks at the wording of the Private Security Industry Act 2001, the wording is written to such that a body needs to be formed to work on behalf of the Home Office. Now, the Home Office have got their own remit insofar as reducing unemployment, increasing employment. They're focusing on statistics. Of course, the private security industry, as we know, is a booming industry. The tax revenue is huge. There are thousands and thousands of people employed in it. And so it's very important that the SIA have an approach where the rationale is equal to both sides of the selling and buying of the market. So if they are to impose a stringent regulation that affect either one or the other, of course, the end result for the Home Office is going to be such that the revenue is going to be far less. So when the SIA working on behalf of the Home Office and the Home Office have their own remit, the SIA can't be seen to be working in contrary to that. They can't be seen to be placing barriers to employment. So hence what we can't have is a system and process whereby we are setting hurdles for anyone entering the industry. We can't be seen to be setting hurdles for a minimum age, for example, a fit for purpose, medically, physically fit, mentally fit, even for joining the industry. The SIA course, it can't be seen to be so difficult for someone to fail. It has to be an open door policy. People have to be accepted into the industry. They have to be accepted and helped through the course. And there you go, out to employment, to provide a serious service for a client who may have a serious reason for that service. So what we have a lot of aspects affecting the end user, from the standard of candidate for training to the training course, and a whole host of detrimental reasons from a business perspective in the private sector, to all affected by the overall remit of the Home Office. And so where is the industry left with? The industry is left with a watered down service that is, for the most part, unfit for purpose for the end user who is acquiring that service that may be serious.
Richard, the passion coming out in your voice, it really frustrates you, the SIA, how it's all being rolled out. Just flipping back, what do you think's been positive? What have they done right? Have they done anything right that you think? You mentioned, I think, one positive was getting rid of the criminal element from many years ago. So that was a positive thing, bringing in licensing. But what else do you think the SIA has done right, if anything, in your eyes?
Nothing. They haven't done anything right. The criminality is just a tick box, and that's easily done through these DBS checks. In terms of actually their other remit of raising standards, when you're to actually ask them, and I've written off to them numerous times, and their responses are totally bewildering. So when, for example, you're saying, why isn't there a minimum age? They'll reply saying there is a minimum age, it's 18 years old. But 18 years old minimum age is a standard default setting for any industry. It's not a minimum age because the SIA imposed it. It's a default setting in minimum age. When you say to them, why can't you impose minimum medical and health checks and so on? They'll turn around and say, well, that's down for the employer to decide. There's an element of the minimalistic approach that the SIA have conducted, and on challenging that level, they will have slopey shoulders and say that that's not our remit, that's the responsibility of the employer.
Yeah, so they're allowing licensing to take place at the minimum standard, and then they're passing the buck to the employer.
Absolutely.
Do their vetting and choose who they want.
Absolutely. And so SIA, why isn't there a driving license required? You're basically telling me that a school leaver without a driving license, who is half blind, half deaf, who gets out of breath walking up a couple of flights of stairs, can attend a 2-week course and provide a service, a serious service, to an end user who actually may have a serious threat to life. Mm-hmm. When you actually consider the ramifications of what an industry regulator has imposed to an end result of what is being received by the client, it is actually mind-baffling. And the thing is, we can ask the industry, is close protection a serious business? This is a serious service. Everyone will provide you with a resounding yes, it is. Well, if it's so serious, why aren't we now providing a serious approach to training? Because the end user could have a serious reason for that service. The whole thing is a ridiculous set of cards that have fallen because of a poor approach. Now, if we were to rewind to pre-2012, when I published that first book, I had written off to the SIA several times, asking them a whole host of questions. And the basis for these questions was trying to gain an understanding of how they came across their decision-making processes with regards to the standards that they ended up. And the question was, did you consult with members of the Met Police, SAS, Royal Military Police Close Protection, to provide advice and guidance on the standards? And they returned and said, yes, we did. But on a little more digging, they didn't. So what they did do was they consulted with former members of those units who then had commercial interests. And of course, the commercial aspect is, insofar as close protection training is concerned, is to rely on footfall. So they want a shorter course and increase the number of footfall through those courses, as opposed to a far longer course with a fewer footfall. Now, of course, that's one and other reasons why the SIA have insisted on a short course, because to increase the course, the duration of the course rather, would increase costs, and it would increase the amount of time, obviously, to attend the course. So when you consider from what the Home Office remit is to get people back to work or to change their career and so on, it's a case of, well, that student now needs to find, say, 2 or 3 or 4 times more cost funding to attend that course, which could take 2 or 3, 4 more times to pass. So the whole thing works against the remit of the Home Office, you see. So where does this leave us at this bottom line? The thing is, we can stand back from this and think, do you know what? The United Kingdom have got a security industry regulator that impose a specific set of margins for close protection. When you actually look at other countries, whether you agree with the SIA level or not, and you look at other countries, let's take the US, for example. So making a comparison between the SIA and the US, there's almost an argument of saying there is no comparison. The SIA are up here, the US are down here. And that's basically because the SIA is a government body. The US doesn't have one. There's nothing at federal level that imposes a set of standards. Some states don't even recognize close protection. Some states say all you need is a concealed carry weapons permit. Some states actually impose, I think it is Vegas, I may be incorrect, impose a minimum standard of a personal protection specialist, I think they call it. But I think we're talking 2 states out of the over 50 states that have a set of standards that you need to pass, but those standards are still very low. What's the private sector do about that in the United States? Well, I mean, this whole discussion thing that the industry on a global scale now is fantastic. People are talking about close protection. People are talking about how to raise standards out there. But for me, it's what is the end result of this? Talk. It's talk. Yes, there are seminars, there are courses and so on and all the rest of it. But there's nothing that imposes a bottom line standard. The client in the US doesn't know what he's going to get. Well, it's likewise, that's argumentatively the same for the UK as well. Because stood by side, you could have someone who's not trained, such as in a 2-week SIA course, and someone who is trained, stood side by side weighing the same. And yet the client doesn't know until something's happened. And by then it's too late, you see.
It's exactly that what you're just saying. When I joined the industry and I'd done my course, I think you get 2 different kinds of people. You get people who will look for a bargain basement course and say, I want to spend £800, £1,000 because I want to get the cheapest course, because in the UK now, everyone has the same badge, whether you spend £6,000 on a course or 1,000. And I went out and my course in South Africa at the time, great course, really enjoyed everything about it. I enjoyed the training, I enjoyed the experience. And when I joined the industry, it mattered what your background was, and it mattered what course you'd done. You know, people looked at you at the provider you trained with, and you got a bit of kudos because you'd invested in yourself and you'd went to this provider to do that course. And I think that's been lost now with the rollout of the SIA and the license requirement, because now it is just a tick box.
Absolutely.
For a lot of people entering the industry.
Absolutely.
So, you know, you will get your good guys and girls who think, yes, I want to invest in myself. This is a career. I'm going to go and get the best training and spend 5,000-6,000, but whatever it may be on a course. But on the whole, you will get a lot of people who will spend, you know, a small amount. And it's like you said, you know, someone flies up to the UK, they need security, and they don't know whether you know what training you've had. You could be government level trained, whatever you've done, or you could be one of the other guys who spent £1,000 on a course, and that client may not actually know. He's just got that security operator next to him. And it's like insurance, you know, until, like you said, until something goes wrong, you've got to hope what you're paying for, that it's going to pay out, and it's going to provide.
And that's the bottom line, Sean, because let's face it, how often do things go wrong? Yeah. When things go wrong on CP operations, we're not talking about an attack on principle. We're talking about things of why haven't you posted that letter the principal asked you to post? Why haven't you filled the car up for the next day? Why haven't you washed the car? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? These are all things that don't get out into the media, and rightly so, because they're boring. They're not interested. The public doesn't need to know about it. What the public needs to know is the fact that the UK government has imposed a set of margins for a training of a close protection operative, a serious profession, whereby the end result could be very serious. That is the bottom line. And what you just said as well, in terms of you can pay this and get that, or you can pay this and get that. The bottom end result is that piece of plastic. So you can pay £800 on a course, or you can pay 5,000. You're still going to end up with that piece of plastic. And at the end of the day, that's the ticket you need to work in the industry. So it's unfortunate that you can have people that will actually go out their way and look for that best training possible, and spend longer on the training, spend more of their hard-earned money on the training, and end up with exactly the same license as someone else. And it brings up the question, should we have a colour-coded license based on experience? But the SIA is simply not going to entertain that, because it's a barrier to employment. People have to start somewhere, of course, and you can't have a set of training courses where the delivery of a certain course provides you with a green license and the other one provides you with an amber one. The whole situation is unworkable. But at the end of the day, someone with a good background, a good course training, isn't recognised on the street because Tom is exactly the same as Dick, who's exactly the same as Harry.
The one thing I've always found crazy about the SIA and the CP sector, from the very first license I obtained last 3 years, you reapply, you get it again. 3 years ago, you apply again, you get it again. There's no refresher training, there's nothing, you know. And I know that, you know, there's been many people who have worked in the industry and renewed their license every 3 years, and they haven't been in full-time employment. Some of them have done very little employment and they've stepped away because they couldn't get work, but their license will get renewed every single time, and there's no barrier to that. You know, there's no checks. Yeah, I find that crazy. It's that 12 years down the line, you can reapply and you're going to get the same license without any checks that you've been in employment or, you know, done any further refresher training to develop yourself. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, sorry, Colin.
No, I was going to say, what if I try and find some positive in all of this? Just a little positive. With the drawdown, people are assuming this is going to get a lot worse because there'll be a lot more people looking for the same amount of work, if not less work. But could we not see that as an opportunity that the client will have a greater selection of experience? Is that maybe a possible positive to look forward to? No,
not at all, Pelham. Unfortunately, the industry just doesn't work like that, because there is one fantastic analogy about the economics of things, and it goes like this. And we're talking about the economic rationales developed by some sort of economist somewhere. And the thing goes about, there are 98 dogs in the, there's 100 dogs in a room, and there's only 95 bones. So they send 100 dogs into the room to grab a bone, and of course 5 dogs come back without any bones. So they come together and they say, how can we fix the problem? And they send the 5 dogs off to training how to find bones. They conduct the test again. They send 100 dogs in to get 95 bones. But of course, the 5 dogs they trained, they end up getting bones. But of course, there's still going to be 5 dogs without the bones. When you're talking about an industry where you have X number of opportunities and Y number of trained operatives, I mean, I don't know how many thousands there are CP operatives now. Last I looked, there was over 7,000. But out of that 7,000 in the UK, you can guarantee, I mean, Sean, we're both guaranteed that only a small fraction of that are actually doing the industry circuit, as you call. And even a smaller fraction of that are involved on permanent jobs. And we're not talking permanent res jobs, we're talking permanent CP jobs that go on. They're proper contracted till you're 65 years old or whatever. These are very small diamond dust opportunities that everyone is after, you see. So what's just happened in Afghanistan? You have an awful lot of SIA trained CP operatives, majority of which are former military. They've gone out there, conducted PSD style operations. Afghanistan closes down. They come back to the UK looking for CP work. And of course, they're hitting an industry sector that's badly hit by COVID. But even if they came back to the country and COVID wasn't around, they still wouldn't be able to slot back into a CP job that easily. Yes, the major security companies out there, the global organizations, they will have fingers in pies in a lot of countries. There'll be opportunities out there. But you'll find that most of these opportunities actually require a whole different set of qualifications. And no doubt we'll talk about that. We'll be talking about the qualification size later on. In terms of the SIACP course and the general industry approach now, which is pretty laissez-faire, they will provide credence to theories that students cannot be expected to take more time off work. There is no evidence that an 8-week course is better than a 2-week course. No course makes anyone an expert. You learn on the job. The course is only a starting point, and a good course can be delivered in 2 weeks. And these are all the excuses where they're falling down to the acceptance line of, do you know what? This is what we've been given. This is our lot in life. Crack on and deal with it. Do your course, get out into the industry, learn the job, and then you can carry on with your career. And this mindset is totally wrong. It's totally wrong. You don't find doctors doing that. Police officers straight out the college, they have a 2-year probation. There's no mechanisms in place to ensure that when someone leaves a 2-week course, that they are then mentored, they're supervised when they go onto a job.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, as we're talking about the drawdown from Afghanistan, it's, you know, already before the drawdown, I think in the UK, there's a lot more bums than what there is seats. Mm. So you're dead right. You know, coming back from Afghanistan as well, the guys who've operated over there for a number of years, they have a different set of skills to what's required in a corporate or within a family office working for someone within the UK. It's whilst, you know, they may have a fantastic set of skills, you know, some principals don't want to employ someone who's come straight, spending 5-6 years in Afghanistan, because they think maybe what's the word? I don't know. They haven't been checked. They haven't had the stopgap, the break. to free themselves from that. You know, they've been in a hostile environment where, you know, to them, all they see is the news, what's going on. They've been sat on the camp doing nothing, but to them, they don't know that. So it is, you know, for them guys who've just come back from Afghanistan, it's going to be very tough to break down. But on the flip side, the guys who have spent a small amount on a course and just done the bare minimum token effort to get work, are already in the UK. Surely, if you're one of these guys or girls, you'd be looking at this vacuum of people coming back to the UK. You've got to think, I'm going to have to invest in myself and do, you know, something more. I only got, you know, first aid at work from this course. I need to get FREC 3 or FREC 4 to improve my medical skills, or go and do that. You know, you need to do something to catapult yourself up that list of operators who are coming back from these places.
Yeah.
But going back, Rich, anyway, stepping back from individual licensing, what was your thoughts on business licensing? We've spoke about anyone can join the UK CP industry with no background whatsoever, you know, no military background, no police background. You can come from school, go and do a CP course and get a license. And we've spoke about the onus is on companies to vet the guys and girls once they've done a course. So what's your thoughts on sort of business license as a second stopgap in quality control? Do you think it would benefit the industry, or do you think?
To be honest with you, Sean, I don't know too much about the business licensing aspect. I do have something actually that I could read out, because I did ask the SIA about them. Just give me 2 seconds.
Well, whilst you're searching for that, I mean, it was spoken about, wasn't it, a few years ago? And I actually thought it would be a really positive thing, because there are so many, you know, fly-by-night companies, and, you know, the undercutting of price across all of these businesses. And if you've got your guys and girls who are licensed, and then if you've got that second quality check with the companies, you haven't got so many companies going for the same jobs. They're held accountable for what they're providing. And I think it would be a positive step, but it just needs to be rolled out correctly and not just as a checkbox like maybe the individual licensing was. But I do think it could be a good thing for the industry.
Well, what I have here, in 2019, the Right Honourable Nick Hurd MP, who was the Minister of State for Policing and the Fire Services at the time, responded to the outstanding recommendations of the review of the SIA. The Minister reported the government's position that the review had produced insufficient evidence for extending the current licensing regime under new legislation. Therefore, the government would not be pursuing changes, such as business licensing, or replacing individual licensing with a compulsory approved contractor scheme. The additional regulatory burden, cost and complexity of introducing business licensing, i.e. while simultaneously phasing out individual licensing to prevent double regulation, without a substantive business case, was a key factor in the government's decision. Business licensing, therefore, will not be going ahead. And to be honest with you, from what little I know about business licensing, I don't really agree with it anyway.
Okay. Well,
it needs to be an individual basis.
Yeah, no, I get that, but do you not think if businesses were licensed, say, you know, your company Mobius, my company, and all the other companies, that it would get rid of a lot of, I don't know, maybe chaff companies that just set up, take on things, and, you know, draw the price down. If, you know, the companies were licensed as well, I mean, I can't see any negatives to it if it's rolled out correctly. I think it would be a good thing, but it's, like you say, it's got to be rolled out in the correct manner and some thought given to it. Otherwise, we have the same situation which you've mentioned. Anyone can go and set up a company, anyone can bid on anything and, you know, get these contracts and, you know, put whoever they want on these jobs. And there's no real quality check. If the quality check is from the company, why isn't the company quality checked?
Well, the thing is, there's several points to what you mentioned, and I do agree with you. However, the way the industry is run is the fact that people, it's an individual career. People are very rarely permanently employed, and when they are employed, it's usually done through a companies set up for the basis of finance and administration, as opposed to a major security company. And we're talking about private family office here. So in effect, you would be termed as directly employed, but for the benefits of finance and admin, you actually come under a company that pays your wages, deals with expenses and so on. But they're not, in effect, they're not actually a security company that provides services to anyone else. It's there solely for the team. So in addition to that, if you were to change something about the security industry business, and what I'd like to see change would be a case of, okay, you're delivering the service, you need to prove, you need to provide evidence of your own training and knowledge in the delivery of that service, so that you can set up a company delivering that service, as opposed to what happens now. Anyone can incorporate a company without any knowledge or training. Yes, I mean, if they could do that, then great. But of course, they can't just do that to one industry and not to any other industry. So then we come back to the Home Office as well on a statistical concern. They want people to be in employment. And if you were to set barriers like that, they are in effect barriers to employment. You want people to create business, to create work, to employ people. They don't care about the standard. In their eyes, the person that cares about the standard is the end user, which is a ridiculous notion, because they're the people who are setting the standards. They're the people who are regulating and licensing the standards. Yeah, these standards that they're imposing on industry is theirs. And yet, what are we left with? What's the end user left with? They're left with an empty suit on the streets. And harsh as though that may seem, that is reality. That really is the thrust of the issue here. And people in the industry, they can harp on about saying, well, this is, I've got this background, I can do this, I can do that. What you're saying isn't really important. It's never going to happen. I mean, don't forget, the UK SIA is solely for the UK environment. So there's a whole list of aspects concerning close protection that the SIA doesn't even include by default setting. There's no high risk environment training whatsoever. So when you have someone attending a 2-week SIA course and they turn around to you and you question them and say, but you're not trained in firearms, you're not trained in anti-ambush drills. Well, what good are you? Yes, but I only want to work in the UK. You can guarantee that if you had a businessman approach them and say, I want to employ you in a few countries in South America, I'll pay you this. Are they really going to turn it down and admit to them, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not trained in a whole host of skill sets that I require for that environment? The whole thing is dare I say, it's the whole thing is shrouded in a smoke and mirrors effect, where you have training providers and operational companies providing a service, a training or operational service, done under the banner of we provide the highest standards. We go above and beyond the SIA. We know what you need. We can provide it. In reality, that's far from the truth. Companies will say we've got strategic partners. In reality, they don't. And I've proven that to myself. I mean, I've seen both sides of the fence. So only up until 5 years ago, I was just solely providing a service on the ground. Now I'm on the other side of the fence, where I'm actually doing the business side. And when you come to interact with other companies and you know that they're involved in the same sort of tendering process, because you have end users approaching various companies for quotes, you know for a fact that other companies, they're not actually true to the word on their website. And let's not forget, in the UK, you have a pool of operatives, the majority of which have done a 2-week course. So that's your pool of operatives, and they're out there. They are ready to work. They fire their CVs off to all these companies. You go on one company website and they'll claim this. You go on to another one and they'll claim this. You go on to another and they'll claim this. At the end of the day, they're using the same pool of operatives. So the end result on the ground in terms of operational performance is exactly the same. A company can state blurb, blurb, blurb on their website, but yes, that may be in accordance with BSI standards, ISOs, and so on, tick boxes for the office. But that doesn't affect operational performance on the ground by the individual. So this is ultimately the most important factor of it. What is an end user, a client, actually receiving on the ground? And when someone says, oh, I've got 10 years experience in close protection, what exactly does that experience involve? I can be following someone. I can be following someone around. I can be sat in vehicles, sat in hotel lobbies for 10 years. Is that experience? Is that really experience of close protection? No, it's not. Anyone can follow someone around. Anyone can be sat in a car or a hotel lobby. But it's actually what you're doing with your head. What are you actually looking out for? Are you being proactive in your threat and risk mitigation? Is the client actually receiving a service he thinks he has bought from a company? I mean, you have a whole host of things of a company oversight on an operation. So you can have a client approaches a company for a close protection service, and the company says, yes, we can provide that. And they'll then fire out on social media, we need 5 CPOs and 3 vehicles for 1st of September to the 2nd of October. They get all these CVs in. There you go. There's a job. Or they'll put a post out on a WhatsApp group. There you go. Bang. There's your job. They'll leave it to a team leader to sort it out. There's lack of concern with a client, his needs. Do they actually sit down with a client and they understand the reasons for the provision of service? Do they actually form a proper threat and risk assessment for him? Do they actually select the CVs according to mitigation of that risk? Do they actually provide that service that the client wants and needs? It's very much a bums on seats, footfall, slapdash, laissez-faire attitude to the whole process. And what does the SIA do? In 2005 or 2004, I gave them a list of everything a CP course should contain. Most of it, they didn't include it. 15 years down the line, we see them consider physical intervention for close protection. I told them about this 15 years ago. The SIA regulate the industry in hindsight. They're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic when it should be steered properly. The whole process is wrong. The industry, I mean, the good things, going back to your question, Pelham, we are digressing slightly. Yes, there are huge positives taken from the industry. The industry has increased for the better over the years. Without a doubt, it has. But let's not forget, what was the start point? The start point was so low. You're talking about courses in garages at the bottom of a garden. To now, you have a license process. You have a somewhat vetted process in terms of criminality. You have a proper regulated and licensed industry. You have an imposed set of standards for a course. And you have an industry where more knowledge about the service is now present than it was decades ago. But should we actually stay there? Should we actually say, wow, pat ourselves on the back, we've done a great job? No.
Well, as long as people like yourself are there, banging the drum, hopefully somebody will listen at some stage. I have some experience with bureaucrats, having worked as a bureaucrat, so I can appreciate the context and some of the difficulties. It's often said, don't commission a report into something that you don't know the outcome already of. Actually, it's often said that's probably something from Yes Minister, but there's certainly room for improvement. So many different places we could go, but I think this is a very useful tour de force and sort of snapshot about now, about what you're doing and about what the industry could help you champion if there are useful ears listening to this, for example. But we do have to end it somewhere. So from Sean and myself, Richard, this has been an excellent expose, snapshot, and I really hope this will energize at least some people with influence. But if not people with influence, then people, as the industry as a whole. That's my wish. Sean, have you got anything more for Richard?
No, I'm all good. I mean, it's great, hearing from you again, Richard. It's been a long time since we've met. We'll have to hook up at some point for a coffee or a beer, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, great to hear from you again. And thanks for your input.
Likewise. Yeah. Thank you very much for having me both.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.